I got a lot of comments on our last video saying that I didn't mention the fact that the bearded lady is Nagakabouros. Even Ilaoi says so. So I just wanna quickly clarify something. I didn't forget about that, but I did forget to mention that's a thing. What's funny is that I explained everything with the fact that Nagakabouros is sometimes called the bearded lady in mind. So really, nothing changes in that video. You just need to remember that even Ilaoi doesn't actually know what Nagakabouros is. So when she has that famous quote,
"Bearded lady, Nagakabouros, names don't matter,"
she's essentially saying that even she doesn't care. But my point still stands. The winged-eared lady is called what she is because of the appearance of the beast. Just like the bearded lady is called after the appearance of the kraken. But that doesn't nullify the fact that some people believe that this bearded lady is also Nagakabouros. Again, remember, nobody even knows what Nagakabouros even is. It's just that some people believe that these two are the same thing. But now, onto the video. Staying on the topic of Bilgewater after you just listened to me mumble about nonsense, yes, we are going to explain the lore of the cinematic about Graves and Twisted Fate. I'm sorry, Valorant fans. And because this cinematic is my favorite out of all of them, there's no need for introduction, so let's dive right in. The cinematic begins with a shot of a lighthouse above the McGregor's kill house, which of course is in Bilgewater. Now, the name kill house is interesting because normally these places would be called the slaughter docks. Unless slaughter docks is actually the name of the kill house in Bilgewater. In that case, the overall name of the place where you carve up fish is kill house, and the slaughter docks is a name of the specific kill house. Anyway, notice the headless fish on the right. You will see the rest of the fish in just a second. The cinematic introduces this place very slowly, as it zooms past some tentacles that are actually still alive, and then it gives us a shot of the head of the fish. But then we get a shot at Twisted Fate's hat, and Misfortune. Because Misfortune is wearing her captain clothes, we know that this is happening in the present days. And as she shuffles the cards, a little magic sparkles up. And as she turns one of the cards around, it is obvious that these belong to Twisted Fate. If you look at the design of the cards closely, you can see how the design of the cards behaves like a mirror into a magical realm. There is parallaxing, which imitates depth, but that's just a tiny detail. Of course, the red card shows a sword, as it does in the game, with some destiny eyes on the top and on the bottom. And then we have a shot of Twisted Fate hanging there behind her. It is interesting to see that even Twisted Fate calls Misfortune a captain. That's how quickly her reputation spread. Because you need to remember, last time Misfortune encountered Twisted Fate, she wasn't a captain yet. She was pretty much a nobody in Bilgewater. All of that happened about 5 years ago during the Burning Tide story. But then Misfortune reveals that she doesn't really care about Twisted Fate, and she's only using him to lure out Graves. Twisted Fate laughs it off and he says that that's never gonna happen. Graves wouldn't be so dumb as to just stomp into the room.
Now Graves is too smart to walk into a trap. If you think he'd be stupid enough to bash...
Which, of course, he did. I absolutely adore the little detail that not only did Misfortune know that Graves would be so dumb as to just walk into the room, she even planted a little trap on the floor, which means that she almost managed to predict the exact spot where Graves would stop. This is a brilliant comedic relief for the entire cinematic. But here I actually need to mention a couple of things. Some of you may remember that very long time ago, before the events of the Burning Tides, Twisted Fate and Graves were rivals. When they were younger, the two were working together. But then the two went on a heist, which didn't end up well, the majority of their crew died and Graves was imprisoned. Only Twisted Fate managed to escape, and Graves blamed Twisted Fate for all of it. So the reason why they are now working together again is because after the event of the Burning Tides, Twisted Fate explained the entire situation to Graves and Graves forgave him. So now the two guys are partners again. The second interesting thing I should mention here is that what is happening in this cinematic is perfectly mimicking what happened in the Burning Tides. If you don't remember, there Misfortune hired both Twisted Fate and Graves, without them knowing that they are both being hired for the same thing, to steal a golden dagger from Gangplank. And of course, as the two went to steal the same thing, to their surprise, as they met, they started fighting, which caused an alarm in Bilgewater. But this was all according to Misfortune's plan. She hired the two guys separately because she knew they would start fighting, which would turn the attention of the entire Bilgewater towards them. And this distraction would give her time to plant bombs in Gangplank's ship. Of course, the bombs then blow up, Gangplank loses his arm, and that's how we get to the present times. So a couple of years later, you can see that they are now in the same situation. Again, they are in the slaughter docks. Only here we don't have Twisted Fate and Graves fighting, but we have Misfortune and Graves fighting. It is very interesting to see history repeat at a very similar place with a very slight change of the characters. I believe that this is a very cool nod to the story of the Burning Tides, that really kicked off what the story of League of Legends is capable of. It's almost a full circle that went back to the roots. But now let's go through the fighting scene. As Miss Fortune pulls out her pistol, you can notice that this is neither shock or awe, which is the names of her two guns. This is some kind of a third gun. We know this because in Legends of Runeterra we actually saw the design of her pistols. And this one is different, and there is a good reason for it. A really cool tiny detail is that as she starts shooting at Graves, you can actually see Twisted Fate trying to grab the gun. But of course, because he's hanging upside down, it is really hard for him to do anything. Then, as Miss Fortune turns over the table, you can see that she's actually paying people with golden krakens. Again, there are 3 kinds of currencies in Bilgewater. I wonder who's keeping track of that. And as we get a closer shot at Graves, there is another interesting thing to point out. I told you, this cinematic is pretty awesome. At the end of the Burning Tide story, Graves actually lost his shotgun. So the gun he's holding here is not his original Destiny, which is the name of his gun. This is another version of the shotgun that he got made for him in Piltover. If you look very closely at it, you can see that the color scheme is slightly different than what we are used to. And I do believe that's because this gun is supposed to be very slightly different. Then, as Graves shoots back, you can see that Twisted Fate finally pulls out the blue card that he was trying to get out earlier, but here he accidentally drops it on the ground. We all know that the blue cards are supposed to give you mana, but in the lore, what does that really mean? So what Riot did instead is that, as you can see by the design of the card, this is the teleportation card. This is Twisted Fate's ultimate. That's why there is the eye, because the eye gives you the sight of all people around you, as it does in the game, and the little copies above the person in the picture indicates the teleportation. Then there is a brief shot at Miss Fortune where you can really see the difference between her guns. Miss Fortune then looks over the table and she notices that Graves is reloading, which gives her a chance to fire back. While in the background, Twisted Fate is still trying to grab his card. Miss Fortune noticed that and so she kicked Twisted Fate away, with a kick so powerful I thought she would break his ribs. Remember, she has high heels. This kick might have been deadly. It is also interesting to see that as Miss Fortune tries to pick up the card, the blue glow actually fades away. So even if Miss Fortune picked it up, I doubt she would be able to use it. I think you need to be a magic wielder for that. But after a lot more shooting and a lot more missing, Graves charges in, grabs the card, again notice that it is not glowing, and he throws it to Twisted Fate. It's also interesting to see how good Graves is at throwing cards. That throw was perfect. And as Twisted Fate grabbed it, he used the teleportation spell, and he simply vanished. Which is something even Miss Fortune gets surprised about. Which, to be honest, I don't think Miss Fortune ever saw Twisted Fate disappear in front of her eyes. She knew that he was a trickster. After all, Twisted Fate does have a reputation in Bilgewater, but witnessing this firsthand might be a bit confusing. And then he appeared behind Miss Fortune and he grabbed her pistol. And together, the two guys managed to corner her. Unfortunately, as you get the wider shot, it was very obvious that they were walking into a trapdoor. And as it starts looking grim for Miss Fortune, he questions how they are gonna split the money. Twisted Fate, being surprisingly honorable, says that they always split 50-50. But with Graves being hot-headed, he argues that maybe they should go for 70-30. And at that point, the two start arguing. And since they were both distracted, that gave Miss Fortune a chance to trigger the trapdoor. And this is why Miss Fortune didn't use her own guns. All of this went according to her plan. And so the gun that Twisted Fate took from her, which is the same gun that you see falling down here, is just a random one. So she didn't want to risk her own gun being stolen. And then we have the two guys arguing inside the crate, with this legendary line.
Get your elbow out of my mouth! That is not my elbow!
Until we get this creepy shot. And when I saw this the first time, I freaked out. First we see the eyes of a sea witch. Then there is a brief pause. And then we see the third eye. Now you have to understand that whenever we see extra eyes, that usually means the void. But I don't think that's the case here. Even all the tentacles on the sea witch's head are green, and they look like they belong to an oceanic god. Perhaps Nagakabouros for all we know. So initially I got very confused. And then Miss Fortune says that as she promised, she gave the sea witch 2 for the price of 1. By which she means that the sea witch actually captured one of Miss Fortune's people. And as the sea witch raises her staff to release the prisoner, if you compare it to all the art on Universe, you can see how the design fits perfectly. This sea witch is somehow related to the serpent callers. We don't really know what this cult is all about, but we know that they are praising some ancient gods. They are around the Buhuru Isles, which makes me think that maybe they are also praying to Nagakabouros, just in a different way than someone like Illaoi. Or perhaps, as I said at the very beginning of this video, maybe there is more to Nagakabouros. After all, nobody really knows what the god is about. Maybe there is also a creepy side to it. Because again, I don't think that this is the work of the Void. And with some weird teleportation spell, she brings the prisoner in. Now this person just says, "Thank you, Captain." And Miss Fortune says that he's lucky that she likes him. At this point you might be questioning, who the heck is this guy? Well, if you listen to what the Sea Witch said earlier on, she called him her quartermaster. Now, I thought that a quartermaster is just a special title for the right hand of the captain, but apparently that's not the case. So even though I really wanted this guy to be Raven, that's not him, and that was already confirmed by the writers. The Sea Witch then mentions that these two will make a worthy sacrifice to the beasts below. So again, you can see that all of these serpent callers are praising some kind of a god. And she then even mentions that they should prepare themselves for 1,000 years of suffering. Which means that she doesn't plan to just let these guys be eaten by a beast. They are actually going to be sacrificed to some greater power. And if it is supposed to take 1,000 years, it is probably going to be some kind of a shenanigan with souls being ripped from their bodies and then they would be tormented. Which sounds like something they would do with Nagakabouros. Nagakabouros is all about toying with your soul. That's why Illaoi has the ability to test your soul. I wonder if perhaps those who are unworthy in the eyes of Nagakabouros are used by the Sea Witches to be sacrificed. But still, none of this explains this eye on her forehead, and I will probably never find out. I should also mention how detailed this guy is. I wouldn't be surprised if Riot brought this character back for the game about the Ruined King. We know that in that game you start in Bilgewater and from there you move to the Shadow Isles and you deal with the Ruined King. And in Bilgewater, in the previous stories, we always had Miss Fortune and her crew together with Lucian fighting the undead. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw not only Raven, but the Quartermaster as well there. And again, the Sea Witch is using some Eldritch magic to lift them up and float away. And this is where the title of this cinematic comes in. The reason why the cinematic is called Double Cross is because Miss Fortune never meant for Twisted Fate and Graves to be harmed. She knew they would both be fine in the end. And that's why she used them specifically to free her own prisoner. She double-crossed Twisted Fate and Graves, and then she double-crossed the Sea Witch by releasing them both. Or at least, as you can see here, she helps them escape. She picks up the red card and she slots it into the crate. So Twisted Fate is able to pick it up from inside, they blow up the crate, somehow survive, and everyone besides the Sea Witch is fine. I mean, she's fine as well, but she doesn't have her sacrifices. But right before the cinematic ends, the Sea Witch says, "Stop them," as if she would be talking to someone else. But we don't learn what's happening there. So what happens next is a mystery. However, although we don't know what happens next, we know how we got to this story. Because right now on Universe, there is a new short story called Destiny and Fate. And this story explains why these two guys are involved with the Sea Witch and how did Miss Fortune capture them. Now, because people are still hyped about Bilgewater, I will try to cover this story as soon as possible. But everyone knows that there are other videos that I really wanna do first. So I have no idea when I'll get to that story. I'll try to do it quickly, but at this point I seriously need to make a video on the Valorant lore. Riot, for the love of God, don't release any more cinematics. Speaking of which, since we got a cinematic with the release of Bilgewater in Legends of Runeterra, and the data mining revealed that Targon is also coming at some point in the future, we might get a Targonian cinematic as well.
There are so many weirdos here.
Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other League facts and stories? And did you know that we have Need mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.